Hey, in this video, we're going to cover MVC with servlets and JSP. Now, when we had our initial discussions on servlets and JSPs, you may have wondered, well, which one to use? And my answer was, hey, use them both, integrate them together. So here we have the servlet that'll do the business logic work, and the JSP will actually handle the view. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a very popular pattern. It's called the model view controller design pattern. And it's actually used by a lot of the popular Java frameworks. So here's the big picture of the model view controller. The web browser will send in the request. The request initially comes into the controller servlet. The purpose of the controller servlet is to hold the business logic. Now, it may delegate a call out to the model to get additional data or additional information. Then once it has the data, then it can send information over to the view page, and the view page is actually the JSP. Once the JSP has the information, then the JSP can render an HTML view, and the JSP will send that view back to the web browser. So that's kind of the big picture here with the model view controller. So what are the benefits of MVC? Well, first off, it's a very good line item to put on the resume because everyone wants this. Sorry, just joking. The main benefits here is one, to minimize HTML code in the servlet. So in our servlet, no more out.print lines in the servlet code because that just didn't feel right. That looked ugly. Also, we want to minimize the Java business logic in the JSPs. So no more large scriptlet codes in the JSP. The JSP will only handle the view. So really, it's a good, clean separation of roles here in our web application. All right, so the big question is, well, how can the servlet call the JSP, or how can the servlet send data to the JSP? Well, the servlet's going to make use of something called a request dispatcher. So here's the actual code for using a request dispatcher. So the first step, in step one, we get the request dispatcher. So we make use of request.getRequestDispatcher, and we give the reference to the actual page we want to reference. So here, viewstudents.jsp. That's the JSP page we want to call. Once we have this dispatcher set up, then we need to forward information to the dispatcher. So here I say dispatcher.forward, and then I make use of the request and the response object. So it'll send it over to the JSP, and the JSP can read information from that request and also use that response. Now, the other question is like, well, how can I send data to the JSP? Like, I need to get additional data from the database or from my backend system. Well, we can add data to the request object using attributes. So here on the slide in step 0, I add data. So first off, I just set up just an array of strings here for students. And then I say request set attribute. I give the attribute name of student_list, comma, the actual value, students. So that's an object. So you can actually add any object here that you wanted. Here I'm simply adding an array of strings, but you can add an array list. You can add a custom object. You can add any Java object that you want here to this request attribute. And then the following steps are the same. So step 1, get the request dispatcher. And then step 2, forwarding to the JSP. All of that's the same that we saw in the previous slide. And you can add as many attributes here as you'd like, as long as they have a unique name. All right, so the servlet has added data to the request object, and they did the request dispatcher to forward to the JSP. Now the JSP can actually view this data, and here we're going to make use of the JSTL, or the JSP standard tag library. So at the top we give our tag lib, and then in the center here we make use of one of those JSTL core tags for each. And we're basically going to loop over the request attribute. So here I have for each, var equals temp student, items equals $ curly brace student_list. This student_list, that's the actual attribute name that was set by the servlet. All right, so the exact same name with the exact same case. That's the data that was set by the servlet, and we can reference that. And we can simply print out temp student, and that'll give us the output here for this system. Great. So this is a very basic example here of setting up an MVC application. So we wrote all the code from scratch. So we looked at the servlet controller, and then we also looked at the JSP. And what we'll do in the next video is that we'll move into Eclipse and we'll actually get some hands-on. We'll write all the code from scratch so you can see how an MVC system works with servlets and JSP. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Woohoo!